All right, Lars, you're good to go.
Okay. Welcome to the Design Review Board meeting of January 18th, 2023. I will read a little script and then we can get started. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order N 2920 regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The live stream of the meeting will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. Members of the public wishing to speak to the DRB on any item listed on the agenda may do so during the discussion of each item. If you're joining us from Zoom, please raise your hand on the application. You will then be unmuted for your public comment. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Also, if you emailed your public comment prior to the meeting, these comments will be summarized for comments into the record. Full emails will be archived as part of the record. Please don't abuse this new way to provide public comment. So we'll call the meeting to order. John, you want to do a roll call for us?
Yes. Board member Carrie Bush. Here. Board member Melissa Hanley.
Present.
Marshall Balfe.
Unmute. Hello.
Thank you. Board member Christine Lovell. And I see her hand up. And Vice Chair. Thanks, Christine. Vice Chair Lars Langberg.
Here.
And Chair Ted Luthen informed me that he will not be able to attend today's meeting, so he is absent.
All right, thank you, John. We have some minutes to approve from meeting of August 17th. I think everyone was there except for Marshall. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? Any comments from anyone? No comments. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll be glad to make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Carrie. Any second?
I'll second that.
Melissa seconds it. All in favor? Say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. 3, 4. Marshall wasn't present at the meeting, so we're good.
Right. Okay, so we have 4 yeses, and those minutes are approved as written.
Okay, planning department update on matters of general interest. John, what's up?
A whole lot. I know that at city council meeting last night, they went over the subcommittee assignments. It doesn't really affect anybody on the design review board. However, we are going to be having our design review board vacancy meetings coming up at the February 7th. So those and the vacancies that we have are Marshall's position, which he reapplied. Carrie has reapplied as a board member, and then Ted's position was reapplied or not reapplied for. So we have a new application coming in for that one. Other than that, I think that's it as far as the planning department stuff goes. We're still working with our consultant for the objective design standards. We had a meeting last week, I believe it was, but I'll let Lars go into detail on that a little bit further on in the meeting. So,
Could you give us a synopsis of the planning department's preliminary review on the Healdsburg Ave project?
the planning commission.
Yes.
Yeah, so they went over the project as you guys did in December. They were in favor of the not affordable, 100% housing for that project to go through the use permit procedure that they would require because of the split zoning on the site. We did talk about, the site constraints with parking and whatnot. The applicant did go over a lot of the items that the board raised as far as excess pavement and a couple of the design features and stuff like that. They did kind of talk a little bit more about, maybe coming back with a potential redesign, if possible. I know that the applicant wasn't too happy about doing, a full scrap of what they've already worked on. But the egress and ingress of the site with the two separate entrances and exits was something that staff still feels would be best handled with a continuous kind of driveway, with emergency vehicle access being kind of difficult if there is an emergency on either the lower section or upper section. One way in and one way out is kind of hard to evacuate people and also get emergency vehicles in there to help out. That was about it. I mean, the planning commission's role in that is mostly the land use allowances. So, going for that residential, 100% residential was something that they were actually in favor of. So that's about it. I'm probably missing something in there, but
Great, thanks, John.
can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
John, just to go back to your subcommittee comment. So on our design standards committee, we had a former council member.
Yes.
And was that addressed at all as to whether they would want a new council member on that committee?
I believe it was discussed. I'd have to go back and watch that part of it. I know that the committee assignments that were sent out to staff didn't include a new city council member. I know that there was, with the previous Mayor Slater's background in architecture and design, nobody on the current council has that same level of expertise. So it would have been difficult, and they felt that it could go forward without a city council member, because their input would mostly be kind of a member of the public input rather than an actual design professional.
Right.
If it was discussed at detail, if they would open it up for a member of the public that has design experience to position. I know that was talked about with staff and the subcommittee, but it wasn't. I don't know if it was fully acted on last night.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Then we'll continue on. Any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? John, do you know of anything from the outside world?
No, we did not receive anything for items that are not on the agenda today.
Thank you. Statements of conflict of interest. Anything there? I'll just say one thing. Actually, I had a very small advisory role at the church when they did their little amphitheater project a long time ago. Rick Taylor of Elder Creek worked on that, and I just helped a little bit with some ADA kind of access issues with that. So I'll put that out there. I don't find it to be any kind of conflict with me working on this part of the project, but it's from probably 15 years ago even, or something like that.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's then move on to our regular agenda items.
Oh,
First
wait,
one is-
I have a question for John. Hello. I have some
Okay.
questions for John. John, can you give us an update on the livery project, the Woodmark project, and the hotel project? Just briefly what the status is of those projects.
Yeah, so the livery project is still moving forward. I know that they went through the building permit to get their construction management plan handled because of the additional story that they're adding onto that building there and just all the other renovations and whatnot. So that's still moving forward. Woodmark is still working in getting some of the items completed through their building permit phase. I know Carrie and Mario from engineering are sending some additional comments for their plans that they resubmitted for some additional fixes and stuff like that as it relates to some of their phase 1 project stuff. For the Hotel Sebastopol, they are still working through getting their archaeology stuff done. It's with the rain that we've had over the last month or so, it's kind of hard to go out there and do those digs on that site. So when that kind of dries up a little bit more, they'll work with the general contractor that they have acquired for the project. And then I know that they're also doing some frontage improvements for Depot Street and Bedlam Avenue there with some of the crosswalks and intersections there that are kind of tricky. So
getting back to the Woodmark project, John, is there, due to the law of SB 35, is there a time limit that the city has to finally approve that project?
the project's already been approved.
So even at this phase, there's no time limit for this phase, for the building permit phase?
Oh, I believe they're, as long as they're moving forward with providing updated plan sets when we send out comments and corrections, then, there's still stuff that they're having to fix to address some of the issues that were originally submitted their building permit application.
So we don't really know quite yet when the construction will start. Okay.
Great time frame on when that would. I mean, I can give you an estimate of late spring, early summer, maybe.
Okay, thanks, John.
Huh?
All right, thanks, Christine. We'll go into our regular agenda now. So we have an item A was continued from prior meeting to vote on a chair and a vice chair. So Ted is moving on. So we need a chair, and I guess we vote for both positions. John, can you give us a little protocol on how we should go about this?
Yeah, so you'll vote first on the chair, and then once that person is selected, they'll take over the meeting as of right now, and then they'll call the vote for the vice chair. I will change their name on there and update that stuff, and then we'll move on to the next scheduled item on the agenda.
And so do we take nominations for the chair, or how does that?
Yeah, so we'll open it up to take nominations for chair. And then if there's anybody that wants to provide an additional nomination, then we'll do that. Once we get nominations, we'll go for second. If anybody wants to second it, and then we'll vote on that nomination.
Okay, Christine, you have a hand up?
Yes, I would like to nominate Melissa as board chair. And my thinking behind this is, number one, as Carrie said, in our last meeting, it's time for some new blood. And number two, we've never had a female board chair, and I think the time is ripe for it, and I think Melissa would do an excellent job.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you, Christine. So, okay, so we have a nomination, just so I'm clear on the process. So we can take more nominations, or we vote on, or we have to second that nomination, or how does that go?
Yeah, so we'll take nominations. If there's any additional nominations, then.
And then also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And then if someone is nominated and doesn't want to do it, they can just sort of withdraw their name, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I was gonna nominate you, Lars, as the chair, and I was gonna nominate board member Level as a vice chair, with the consideration that maybe Ms. Board member Level would want to have a camera attached to her Zoom meetings. Just the fact that we would have a face than a voice would seem suitable to the board.
So Christine, I see your hand up, but before we do that, so John, the way you just said it, like, so vice chair, we wait on, right? We're
Correct.
just gonna
Oh,
just do
apologies.
chair for now.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 nominations for chair so far. Christine, do you have a comment related to those 2 nominations or something else?
I just want to put out generally that I would like to decline any nomination for myself for chair or vice chair.
Okay,
So don't nominate me.
we could always do that. We could always just decline, and then by process of elimination, we could get to the chair, right? We could go about it that
We
way.
could do that. We could do that.
Okay, we have a score of 2-1 right now. Any other nominations for the chair?
I also board member Level, thank you very much for your nomination. That's just really lovely of you to say. I was going to nominate Lars as well for chair. I would like to decline the nomination as chair. I think I'm too new to this board to take on that role. But I very much appreciate the endorsement.
All right, thank you. Well, I wanted to nominate Carrie Bush actually to be chair, being one of the longest standing members of the board, with a little bit of experience as chair here and there.
Mhm.
So I know that you've talked about leaving the board also for giving someone else an opportunity, but I would like to throw your name out there.
Appreciate that, Lars. Yeah, it was. I think I was vice chair for 4 years before you became the vice chair. It was just that I thought the next step in the role, and I again wholeheartedly appreciate your nomination, but I thought maybe it would be your turn to step up and go ahead and assume that role as chair. But yeah, that was why I nominated you. But I appreciate it. So I'm comfortable with the position either way, to be perfectly honest, and I really do appreciate that. But I have a little hesitancy, all due to the fact that I have not yet still had an interview yet with the city as as a not only a recurring board member, but also to have to again be selected through the new council as a board member. So it could be that I could be if I was elected today as a chair and I'm not selected as a board member through this new council, then you'd be revoting.
That would be political turmoil.
Maybe depends on how the interview goes.
Well, thanks for your comments, Carrie, and thanks. Thank you, and Melissa, thank you for your nomination as well. Okay, any other? So we have two nominations, three, one that was withdrawn. So 2 nominations for board chair. Anybody else want to throw a name out there, or should we go ahead and take a vote? Or no, I guess we have to second a nomination. Right. So if we have two nominations, we have to second both, I guess, and then we vote, or we go one at
So
a
I guess
time?
the big question for me, Lars, is do you accept that nomination?
Oh, I'll accept that nomination.
Okay.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
So I
So-
made the suggestion, so I think we might need a second, guys.
Thought I made the nomination. Too many of us have nominated Laura.
Can
The
you hear me?
nomination, even though you
Oh.
nominated him. And there's more nominations, but it needs a second,
Yeah.
an official second.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'll be glad to officially second that nomination as current Vice Chair Langberg as the now new chair of the Design Review Board for the City of Sebastopol.
Okay, thank you. Marshall, you wanted to chime in there?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we voting? Is that what we're doing now? I'm getting confused. I would like to see you, Lars, as the next chair.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Marshall. We're sort of in a roundabout way voting here.
Sounded like
Yeah.
a good second to me.
Okay. So we can open it or take it to voting. So board member level,
So we're voting on Lars Langberg as chair, correct? Just so I'm clear?
correct.
Okay,
Yep, sorry.
that's okay. All right, we can take
Jean?
vote.
So we're voting now?
Yes.
Okay, I still stand by my position of, with good reason, wanting Melissa, so I'm going to vote no.
Okay. And Carrie
Yes.
and Marshall
Yes.
and Melissa. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes. And Lars,
I can vote for myself, sure, yes.
just to make sure you still want to do it.
Sure. I'd be honored to do it.
Okay, so that's 4 yeses from Melissa, Lars, Carrie, and Marshall, and 1 no from Christine. Let me change your name real quick. All right, so now we are voting for the vice chair.
Okay, so we had a nomination earlier from board member Bush, which was declined by Christine Level. Christine, do you have a nomination for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Melissa for vice chair.
I will graciously accept. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate it.
All right, any other nominations for vice chair out there?
That sounds perfect. Good fit.
Sounds good to me. I'll second that nomination.
Mhm.
So we have a motion and a second, and I'll call the roll. Christine,
Yes,
Marshall,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
and Lars.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 votes for yes, and let me change Melissa's name real quick.
This is fast political process
I
here.
was going to
Yes.
say, this is like the most efficient government process ever.
All right, so we have a new chair and vice chair. Congratulations to the 2 of you. And now we
Thank
will
you.
move on to the meat of today's meeting.
All right. So our next item is for project at 500 Robinson Road, St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. Christy Laborda Harris is our applicant, and Joe, would you like to give us the staff update, staff report?
So this is for a cafe and beer garden for the church at the St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. The cafe will be on site near a large children's playground area, which was recently installed on the northeast corner of the lot. The cafe will serve coffee, food, beer, and wine to members of the church. This use permit was received and heard at the Planning Commission meeting on January 10th, where the Planning Commission heard a staff report, a presentation from the applicant, and public comment. The item today for design review is to go over the design aspects of the cafe and beer garden as it relates to its proximity to residential neighborhoods. It is zoned on a residential site, and I know that this is kind of a commercial use in a residential neighborhood. So staff felt that it would be best that the design review board take a look at this project to provide any comments or concerns for the applicant regarding the location of the two containers, as well as providing any input on color design and exterior lighting that may be installed by the applicant. Staff does have a couple recommendations in there. For the design review board to allow staff during the building permit application phase to review the lighting plan to make sure it complies with the dark sky compliance ordinance, as well as any additional fencing details that may be brought up to separate the cafe and alcohol portion of the use. The applicant is also going to be applying for a Type 51 ABC license, which is a club license, and that only allows them to sell beer and wine to members of the church and their guests. So it is not fully open to the public, but the applicant does want to make sure that they are willing to have members of the public enjoy the festivities that are available through the playground. With that, I think that's about it. I'll hand it over to Christy. I know she has a slide presentation. We'll go from there.
Thank you, John. I realize that not everybody has been on our property or recently, so I just have a few photos to share with you to give you a feel for this space, and then I welcome any questions.
You should have screen share. Okay, cool.
There we go. So this is looking towards Robinson Road, toward our eastern boundary. There is a large, you can see the seed garden there, which is run by the community seed garden that stores seeds to be more locally sustainable. And it's a pretty sizable garden that is between this play area and Robinson Road. So you can't actually see the road. It's also at a lower level. There's a hill that slopes downward to Robinson. And then toward the right side, you're seeing a little bit of our northern boundary, the oaks that are between us and our northern neighbors on Bodega Avenue. This is an overview of our full 4 acres. At the bottom, you can see our parking lot, and then a circular drive comes off of that that gives access for folks with limited walking to the sanctuary, which is parallel to that circle, kind of the lollipop of the circle. And off of that building, the roof line of the building, you can see a circle that comes off of that. That's the outdoor sacred space that I believe Lars mentioned, speaking about with the ADA accessibility that we built a ways back. And to the right of that is the play area, which I will zoom in on in a moment, but you can see it's sandwiched between the seed garden and that outdoor sacred space. So it is pretty central to our property in general. Zooming in a tiny bit, just move this bar. You can't see the mound there that is already built toward the top, but you can get a sense of the space. To the left is the larger shipping container kitchen and some sort of ADA seating that would be coming off of it. It is, there's a large oak tree there that we will make sure we are not under the drip line for, and we will plan on some more plantings between the shipping container and our outdoor sacred space. There's already a wall of podocarpus that are planted around the outdoor sacred space, and then that oak tree basically abuts those plantings, but we would intensify the plantings there of some sort. And it's kind of at an angle between the outdoor sacred space, and then that other rectangle you can see with dark edges is an old bell tower, kind of a building remembering a priest that died in active ministry. And then you can see there's a sign for an optional food truck. That is actually where we would put the beverage container that is 20 feet long. So that kind of backs up to the circle that we have. And then off the circle, you can see a semicircle, and that's a memorial garden. So the fencing would go around the whole area with access off of the circle for entrance. And another gate on the north side, because we have a walking path from Robinson Road up to Bodega, Burbank Heights, that a lot of neighbors walk through, and we want to continue to have that pathway and for folks to be able to enter off of there, but for the fence, for it to be a gate that closes so that parents are not worried about children escaping that direction. Let's see. This is another view of the mound that the slide is on. This is looking through the tunnel, just to kind of give a feel for the space. This is the playhouse and kitchen back up to the seed garden, and that the seed garden is fully fenced. We received a grant from the larger Episcopal Church, the United Thank Offering, for the shipping container kitchen, which I just include to show the larger Episcopal Church support for new models of church, for dreaming about different ways to be and to gather. This is an example of a shipping container kitchen. We would not lean towards bright red, but just to kind of give people a visual for what it can look like. And when I talked to John a little bit earlier about lighting, I could imagine something like these lights off of the container, just so that there is some good localized light when people, if it was dark when people were ordering. Another example and a brief visual of the inside. And then that's our last shot of, and again, that's facing east. And if you were to turn directly around, you'd be facing our outdoor sacred space, which I believe is either 60 or 80 feet across, and then an outdoor labyrinth, which is 40 feet across. So it's a pretty big space to that western boundary, and then up a hill to Burbank Heights. And just in general, I would say that we've worked really hard on developing this property. Mainly since I've been here almost 12 years, and the aesthetics are really important to this church community. We've been working with Occidental Arts and Ecology. They have been very gracious and generous, bringing classes here that have helped to plant our whole Robinson Road frontage with a food forest. We put in the redwood welcome gate and really opened up a split rail fence to give an intentional welcome to neighbors who were skirting the fence to walk their dog. And I think not knowing that we wanted them to be on this property. And so we want these containers to be in keeping both with the aesthetics we've been working on, with the natural environment. When Melissa came by earlier and I was referencing places in town, like I always confuse the two, like Horse and Plow, with it's going to be a laid back spot with picnic tables, nothing super fancy. And we will hope to have the shipping containers blend as much as possible with the setting, with the outdoor setting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christy. Thanks for your presentation. I guess we should take questions of staff, if anybody has any for John, before we ask any questions to our applicant. anything staff related?
Don, I was just curious on the actual landscape program that's involved with the project. Is there any type of MWELO policy that the city saw as as a guideline for the project, or does that fall as an exempt type of category, or kind of item?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure because it's not. I don't know what category it would fall into. I would lean probably towards an exempt because the site's already mostly developed and it's just adding a couple structures. So, I mean, they are providing some private or some planting on the site, but I don't think it's to a point where it would trigger any WELO standards or anything like that.
I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Any other questions for John, for our staff? If not, we can, are there any questions for our applicant about the project? Christine?
Christy, I was wondering with those shipping containers, when you order them, is there like a certain specific color palette that they offer you, or can you get any color that you want? How does that work?
I honestly have not done recent research on them. I did it a while back and then have pretty much focused on getting through the planning commission and the other things that have needed to happen. I think that there is probably a pretty broad palette. I wouldn't be surprised if there are not price levels for the different types of finish. And we will be trying to minimize cost where possible. So I don't fully know, if there are suggestions around palettes or tones or whatever, we would take that into account for sure. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer on that one. I have seen them in many different places with many different appearances. So I'm sure you can do anything. It's a question of what are you willing to pay for?
Well, my recommendation would be some kind of an earth tone type of a color, if your color is limited in your selection, as opposed to obviously some brilliant color like that red or a lime green or something that's going to blend in. Your building is sort of a unique color, so you may not be able to match that, but some kind of a earth tone type of colors would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that makes sense. We want it to not clash with the building, which is kind of these salmon and terracotta colors. But definitely, that is my imagining is a more earth tone building. We're not, in a downtown urban location.
All right, any other questions, Christine?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Carrie, did you have a question of the applicant?
No, I didn't. No, pretty
Okay.
good. Thanks.
Marshall, any questions?
My only question is I'm a bit confused there. On the drawings, there's what's called an optional structure. And I'm just assuming that that's where the beverages would be sold from. But, I want to be really clear in my mind about that. Is there one structure or are there going to be two?
You're correct. There would be two. So the 40-foot would be a full kitchen that we would be leasing to a chef so that they would have complete access and we would not be stepping on their toes. And then the church would be selling beverages out of the 20-foot container.
I see. Okay. And whatever color scheme you develop for the food structure, I would think you'd want to do the same color on the other building. That's just my opinion, but I would think you'd want to keep them the same.
That is what I would imagine as well, unless somebody who's far more artistic minded than I am, had something where they, complemented each other or were slightly different or something, but I would imagine the same color.
Right. Perhaps the awnings could, be different, but, more exciting. But anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay. Melissa, any questions of the applicant?
No, I was able to visit with Christy today on site. She was gracious enough to have me, so I was able to get my questions answered IRL.
Okay. I just had one.
Melissa.
Sorry, Christine, did you have something else?
I just said likewise, I visited with Christy on the
Oh,
site.
okay. I had one question, just it was not entirely clear to me about who can patronize this site. So it's sort of a little confusing in the staff report if it's or in the staff report it sounds like it's for members of the church, and then in your you had a really nice narrative, Christy, about the whole project. It talks about neighbors coming to the place as well. So is there ABC restrictions on who can come, or city restrictions, or church restrictions, or could you answer that one?
Yeah, so the Type 51 license is a club membership, which is available to nonprofits that have over 100 members, have been in existence for over a year, and do outreach into their community, all of which we meet. And they allow the nonprofit to set the membership guidelines. And so much like our traditional church community, of which this is a growing out of, we are open to all, but there are expectations. And so our plan is we don't want a threshold to make it a limitation. We want to welcome others into this community who are not part of the Sunday morning worshiping part of the church, but that would see themselves a part of this broader church community. And so we will set membership guidelines such as, a $20 a year membership fee. Sharing with us they'd have to sign up. We'd need to have their contact information. And we would set an expectation of regular presence and participation. So that, and we already treat everyone who's on our property as part of this community. So we have other groups that meet here regularly. We have choirs who very much, while they're not in our church on Sundays, they feel that this is their church, and neighbors who've been walking this property with their dogs forever. And so this is their church. So we already view as part of it. They would have to sign up so that we formally had a membership role that included them.
So if a neighbor can't just walk over and have a cup of coffee without signing up and paying a yearly fee or something.
Correct. And as a church, we would also have an exception should the financial piece be a barrier to anyone. We don't turn folks away for that. But yes, folks can't show up and not be signed up as members unless they're a guest of a member.
As a guest, right.
Yes, that is part of the ABC's rules, that you can have guests.
Okay, great. All right, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, we can just bring it back to the board for discussion. We had a couple comments already about the color. Oh, sorry, John.
We got to open it up for public comment first.
Oh, right, of course, yes.
We have one person here.
Yes. Candace, I see your name. Is there something you'd like to speak about with this item on the agenda? Nope. I saw you unmuted for a second, Candace. Are you here for this item? Is there something you'd like to address to the board? No, maybe having technical difficulties, perhaps. We can jump in, raise your hand. We cannot hear you now. I see your chat, but we cannot hear you. Sorry to say. If you type more of a message, we could read it, I suppose. Oh, I was just listening for comments on Healdsburg Avenue. Okay, so not for this item. Okay. And so I guess that's all we have for comments from the public on this item, unless, John, you have something else. I mean, there was some comments in the staff report, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, but there was no additional comments for this meeting.
right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's bring it back to the board. We had two comments already about the color. Maybe we could just talk about that if anybody else wants to talk about color options, color possibilities for the containers. Carrie, Melissa, go ahead.
I would just echo my board members' comments about maybe keeping it more neutral and perhaps darker in color. I had the benefit of going on site today. They've done an absolutely stunning job with the landscaping. I went here probably 25 years ago, so it's been a minute, and it was a field. And there's this incredible outdoor structure that's very modern. Carrie, I think it's right up your alley. You would love the landscaping they've done. It's outdoor space, and all of the moves they've made thus far give me a lot of confidence that they're going to do this really well.
Thank you. Carrie, any comments, I guess, color or otherwise?
Not really. I'm not afraid of color, and I think it's fun to see the program presented here in this package. I'm in support of the program. Regarding the color, I've had experience with outdoor containers like these put in landscapes, not only as a sort of a hospitality area, but they can get hot. I do know that. So painting them a dark color would definitely make them a little hot box. And they work and they function really well. I think it would require an epoxy paint, which is pretty heavy duty. Some of the colors are limited in that realm unless there's something blended or such. But again, I think it's kind of a fun, punctual element to the landscape, and it could be fun to see it a more primary color. So I'm not here to say that it needs to blend into nature. I think it's not nature, it's different than nature. So be it what it is, let it be what it wants to be. Let it be fun, let it be colorful, and let it be part of your community. I think it's great.
Christy also mentioned they might engage with an artist to do a wrap or something in the future, using it more of a canvas, which sounds like an awesome idea.
So we definitely haven't looked into that, and could be expensive, and I would be concerned about longevity of something like that in terms of the beating of the sun on it. But there has been thoughts of ways that they could be used as a canvas. But I think we'd probably start with something more long-term, and
so it'd be factory finished. Yeah. Which might very much limit what you can choose. Yeah. Okay. Marshall, do you have any other comments? You had mentioned you had one comment on color before. Anything else you'd like to throw out there?
No, I meant to ask. I was confused also about who gets to come and use the facilities, and you got that answer for me, because in different areas it talked in different ways, in the reading, and it's a funny thing about the color. When I started, I went over there today also and looked at it, and when I started my career, I got mad all the time about communities saying they had the houses and so forth had to be earth tones. Drove me nuts. And so now that I'm interested in more exciting presentations of buildings and more creative things, and I love bright colors. In this case, though, I personally don't see it as a place for exciting colors. It just doesn't feel right to me. I can't explain it, but it's just my reaction. That's all. So anyway, that's really all I had. And I've looked at this church as a place to become a member, and I only live a few blocks from there, so it would, anyway, that's it. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Carrie, you have another comment?
I'm looking at the little food pantry in the color for the food pantry, and that is without a doubt not an earth tone and or a color that blends into nature. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a existing color from a structure that exists on the site that, to me, in my professional opinion, doesn't have a particular earth tone or color that blends into nature. So therefore,
Okay.
I did suggest hot pink when I was on site.
Oh, wait, you're changing your tune.
or hot. I just didn't want to say salmon, but I didn't know.
I mean, I'd paint the whole world hot pink, so I'm the wrong lady for that conversation, but
Is that an earth tone? Is hot pink an earth tone that I've missed along the way?
obviously, the new pink.
Those are just 2
Chris?
cents.
Thank you. Christine, any more comments other than earth tones?
Yes, I just want to comment that the church has created a rather wonderful, soothing, non-urban, natural environment around their church. And that is why I'm suggesting a rather vague concept of an earth tone color. But I think that it's wonderful that they've created this environment there. I think that it's, in my personal opinion, the sort of environment that's very good for children. And I would like to see whatever they add in there to continue to create the environment. I'm struggling for a word here, the vibe of nature, the calmness of nature, and the escape from the urban environment. So that's why I'm thinking colors, maybe earth tone's not the right word, but colors that kind of blend the buildings into the background and let the nature really pop up and take control of the environment. So that's what I've got to say about color. Earth tone may not be, it may be just an overused term, sort of like walkable and vibrant and all those other terms.
Those terms. Okay, thank you. Well, I guess I'll just chime in on color and then we can sort of continue on. But I mean, it's a big site with a lot of earth tones already, and big trees and mulch and landscape. So I appreciate what you said, Carrie. That I mean, it's such a rigid, boxy container that is clearly not natural or nature-based. That to me, it's an opportunity to do something more whimsical. And if you talk about an environment for kids, like, wouldn't that be fun, right? Just to have a big yellow box there or something that is the food place or whatever, So but I guess we're hearing all sort of different opinions from the board. It seems like, I think also I'd agree with Carrie in the sense of like, what it's the church, it's you guys that have to kind of come up with what works for you. You've already done a great job over the years of creating your own environment. So what do you want, more pop, or do you want something that is more background? Like, it's kind of like, up to you guys to kind of find that right balance, I would say.
I'll also say you can't see it from the public way.
That's a good point. I was going to say that. Yeah, it's pretty set back there. So I think in that, or you'd catch like a little glimpse, and a bright color might draw you in or something. So that's color, and then we were asked to talk about lighting and fencing. Were two other things that we were asked to weigh in on. So I guess I'll start with lighting. Just kind of curious. There must be landscape lighting on site already, which is typically low level, dark sky friendly kind of lighting. So in some way I could see that coming into this site perhaps as well. I mean, you showed a picture of the gooseneck barn type lights, something like that could work. But I think in the program there was mentioned string lights, or, so I don't know if those would meet the dark sky initiative, or if there's downcast versions of those, or but those are some lighting thoughts. Anyone else want to pipe in on lighting?
Well, I think that's a good question for the client or the applicant, sorry, but if they did have string lights in mind, then generally they're shielded, I think, to sort of, be effective from a night sky ordinance perspective. So if there were landscape lights and those sort of things, I'm sure there's some type of timer, an astronomical timer that would, turn them on and turn them off. I think the hours of operation were from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I read. So, I think if you're turning things off by 10 p.m., it seems pretty reasonable to me. And if you have a beautiful landscape, maybe you're, really showcasing that as well. And it's a more ambient, addition or adjunct to your garden.
Yeah, I think we will be adding a little bit more light on the footpath that leads from the parking lot. It's something we've needed to do for a while to run some underground lines and make that a safer walk. And then there are lights on the building that have been here a very long time that do face down, that give lights under the outdoor walkways, and they are on a timer, so they do go off. They go on at dark, and I'm not sure exactly what time, but I think by 10. And then we have one or two motion sensors on the property and a couple of parking lot lights that we've responded if neighbors have asked for them to be darkened or whatever. We figured out ways to do that. So yeah, I was imagining sort of a localized light on the structures themselves, like the gooseneck. I was imagining the cafe lighting for the evening, but not to stay on after we close. Just to provide some low soft lighting as darkness falls. And the one other thing I would just think about that I mentioned to John earlier was some sort of lighting, perhaps as you enter into the space. I'm a little concerned that as we build it up, it becomes a more attractive place for folks. And when it closes down in the evenings, I wouldn't want it to be pitch black. So I would maybe try to look at how can there be enough lighting to deter folks from causing trouble without bothering any neighbors who might have a line of sight to that area, which is limited lines of sight. But I'm aware that there are the Bodega side down the hill, there are homes down there.
Okay. Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh no, go ahead. You guys go ahead.
Okay, Christine, any lighting comments?
I think that there's been some great ideas presented here. I don't think we have anything specific to pass judgment on. And so I feel like there's really nothing to say, because my job is not to design the lighting, but to comment on the lighting. I feel like we've had some really good ideas, and I feel that they could put these into some more specific plan and then just present it to staff for approval. I don't think we need to see it again, but I think that there should be something specific that they present, rather than just sort of a blanket approval of ideas.
Right. That makes sense. And John, you've already sort of asked for that in the staff report, that a lighting plan would come back for staff approval. That sounds good. Are there any other, Melissa or Marshall, any comments related to that? That seems like a good approach.
Yeah, I like what she said.
Okay. And fencing, I guess, is sort of similar. John, you had asked for that to come back to staff. Is there any fencing comments we want to make now? Recommendations, comments?
I would just ask that it be in keeping with the other fencing that they've done on site. More of like a naturalistic approach.
As opposed to chain link? That was
No, I
mentioned
love
in the staff report.
Right. Who doesn't love a good chain link fence? But yeah.
As long as it's at least 10 feet high. Okay. Then that seems, it's a similar recommendation, I guess, of like lighting or fencing in keeping with the character of what's on site already. Any other comments on that? No further comments? Okay, then I think that was kind of really what we were asked to look at. Would somebody like to fashion a motion?
Well, I had one other question, and it was regarding signage that I read about in the report as well, that it would come back to us. But again, John, would it go to staff if signage met all kind of minimum requirements, or does it have to come back to DRB?
No, that's correct. So there was no signage proposed. I did talk to Christy about, potential signage in the future. If it meets the minimum requirements for, our sign ordinance that staff can approve at that level, then we would do that at that level. But if it does exceed, if it needs some sort of an exception or it's over the allowed amount that we can do as staff, then it would come back at a later point in time. I know Christy wasn't, didn't have any full ideas for signage as of yet. And I think she mentioned that, potentially looking at doing full signage for the whole church, and, maybe we wrap that into a sign program for the church and then knock it all out at once.
Right.
So those are just, options for the future. So as of right now, there's no proposed signage. If it meets staff level approval that we can do, then we'll do that. But if it doesn't, then we'd have to bring it back to the board for approval, just like any other project in town.
Got it. Yep. Okay.
Okay. Christine, you had your hand up. You still have a comment or a question?
I was going to make a proposal or a motion.
Before you do that, I just wanted to, we talked about signage, lighting and fencing and the color, and we're kind of in that category too, but the color doesn't have to come back to even staff for approval. Is that correct?
As long as, I didn't specify any color recommendations because I don't know what, is available for Christy. So I didn't want to say, you're only allowed browns, and then, the company that she chooses doesn't do browns, and then she has to come back and get that amended. So I kind of left it open. I mean, the building permit itself will come back to staff for review, so we can review that in the nature of, making sure it fits within the site and that it also respects the board's recommendations as far as the colors that you guys spoke about today. And if there is something where I don't feel comfortable, I can, elevate it to the board again to, look at the colors that are actually going to be proposed. So.
Okay, but it seemed like our discussion was kind of open-ended enough where with color as well, all these things is kind of leaving it up to Christy and to come up with what they want to do. And some of that will go back to, I guess all of it will go back to staff for approval with the building permit.
Correct. And if there's anything outside of what staff feels comfortable approving, then we can always bring it back to the board for full recommendation.
Okay. All right. If Christine, you want to try your raised hand?
Yeah, I'm going to start with a brief comment, and then I'm going to move into the motion. So I think that the signage isn't even part of this discussion anyway. Correct, John? That's just going to come up as a later thing. I discussed that with Christy today earlier. So we don't even have to worry about the signage right now. Okay. So, and I feel that the applicant and their organization there has shown really well thought out and tasteful decisions on their property. So I feel confident. So I am going to propose that we approve the buildings, and the color choice can be bright or earth tones, depending on what they decide based on the options that they have. I trust that they'll make a good decision, and that the buildings are approved in this motion so that they can go ahead with trying to order the buildings and get that process started. And then the fence and the lighting will come back to staff based on our recommendations and suggestions for approval by staff.
Okay, I think we got that as a, okay, do we have a second for that motion? Carrie seconds that. All right. Let's call a vote then. I think we've had probably no more discussion. We could call a vote.
Okay. Marshall,
Sorry, do we need public we already got the public comment?
You did.
This, okay, great.
Thank you. I don't know if you say that again, John. Okay, so we're
Marshall-
voting. We're
Marshall
voting on
Bowles.
the motion from Christine. Marshall,
Do I say yes or?
or
If you'd
no?
like.
Or no? One of the two.
Okay, I agree with it. Yes.
okay. Carrie, Christine is yes. Melissa
Yes.
and Lars.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes 5-0. And congratulations, Christy. You made it through the design review board process.
Now I just have to get church members to agree on colors. So
Yeah,
please say a prayer for us. But
Good
I,
luck with that.
I appreciate your time and I appreciate your care. So thank you.
Yeah, Christy, thank you for your time and again for your thoughtful presentation and narrative. That was all really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay. So anything else? We have subcommittee updates on the agenda before we adjourn. Christine, do you want to update everybody on the design standards we talked about that committee?
Yes. First of all, this Objective Design Standards Subcommittee has been a fascinating learning process for me. So when we started the meetings, I didn't know really what the purpose was or what was happening. But the purpose of the Objective Design Standards is actually a mandate from the state to cover the SB 35 and the SB 330 and the SB 9. So we went through a process where they were trying to lay out so we have a consultant, and the consultant's laying out the sort of zones that we're going to be applying these objective design standards to. And we've had discussion about this, and I think we had some really interesting discussion about, increasing density and what other types of zones or uses we could put into certain zones, in particular along Healdsburg Avenue North. And I think it's worth everybody's thoughts to think about this. It was, I thought, productive. The next phase of my concern about the consultant is he keeps saying, well, this is our last meeting and now we're going to present you with the final product. And I feel like, well, what about the design standards? We haven't really talked about them. So the next meeting, well, I don't even know if we have a next meeting, but he's going to present us with the design standards, which I feel we haven't really discussed. I don't know how you feel about it, Lars, but specifics of that. So I think we need to make sure that we have a review, and I believe that these design standards should be available. This packet that he's presenting should be available for all of public to review. Is that correct, John?
I'm not sure if it's a public document yet or not. I would lean towards probably not, because it's not something that we've adopted yet.
Not yet, but I think that it's more like a question of if there is a chance for public review outside of that committee at some point.
Yeah, so the two that are available would be the city of Belvedere, and then
What was the other one? Campbell?
and Corte Madera, I think.
Well, Corte Madera would be interesting to look at. Campbell's still
Yeah.
in process. Okay, so what
So-
concerned me about what was happening at this point was that he was very clear that he's got a boilerplate set of objective design standards, and I've looked at the Belvedere ones, and quite in-depth. And those Belvedere standards are very, very, very specific. And he's going to present us with whatever he has. And then we're going to have to look through, it's an arduous process going through the whole thing, believe me. And we're going to have to look through and see whether or not these, are standards that we want. And I'm a little concerned that the process is quite a bit of hurry up. We're going to give you these standards and then you're going to tell us whether or not you like them, basically. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but like the Belvedere standards, for example, one of them, I'm just bringing up an example, is that you cannot have a ceiling height in your residential building that's less than 9 feet. That's very specific to me. And that's now become what you must do in Belvedere.
Mhm.
I don't know how many people knew about that, but I mean, it's to that level of detail is what I'm saying. So I feel like we need to have adequate time to look these things through. And I don't want to feel like I'm rushed to just approve it. But it's coming from a boilerplate set of standards. It's
Right.
not like I asked him, I said, how do we know what we want for our city? And he says, well, I've just been listening to you guys talking in these 2 meetings we had, and I know what you guys want now. And I think, no, that's not, how is that possible? We didn't talk about that. We talked about zoning. And I think we had really good, productive conversation about the zoning and what we're going to zone for and how we're going to get more density and these types of things. But, we had to push for this second meeting. We weren't going to have this second meeting that we just had. We had to push for this. And he was very clear saying, well, we didn't have this in our contract and we had to get this second meeting. And now I asked him about the design standards and he said, we're just going to give them to you now. So he's going to present us with a whole big thick packet. If you look at that Belvedere packet, which I keep talking about because I'm familiar with Belvedere, so I wanted to look in an area that I was familiar with, and 3/4 of that packet are very specific design standards. You can't have ceilings more than 9 feet. Your entry to your building can only be 2 feet from the corner. You have to have a porch and the porch can only be this size. I mean, it is amazingly specific. And I feel like we need to think about this, or we at least have a chance to review it. And I'm going to ask you, John, also, wait, I'm not quite done here. John, I'm going to ask you if you could please print out that Corte Madera packet for me so I can look and see how Belvedere compares now to Corte Madera. Because also additionally, I did some research and I went to the state sites because this is coming on high from the state. They're requiring this. And they have a sort of boilerplate package that it seems like the consultant is using their outline format to come up with their boilerplate package.
Yeah.
I can send you that document, but there's a document from the state very specific. And I can see, I'm a little bit, to be honest with you, I'm just going to say it. I can see how if you're doing SB 35 and SB 330 projects and they're telling us, oh, this is to protect you from these projects. But if you're the developer and you could develop a set of standards that are really specific and get all the cities to adopt them, then you can just take your building and you can plunk it here and here and here and here, and there's nothing the city can do about it. And I mean, I don't want to be the devil's advocate, but I'm kind of suspicious about this at this point. So I feel like we should have the opportunity to really review those specific standards and see if that's what we want see what's going on here.
I think we do. I mean, that's part of the process. That's what the committee is to review what the consultant comes up, to give input and then review what they come up with. Right? I think that's definitely part of the process. And maybe so far it hasn't, it's stayed at a higher level of zoning and identifying different zones and opportunities in different zones in Sebastopol. We're actually there's no recommendations for rezoning or, that level of stuff. That's a higher level planning commission, general plan kind of level. We're just trying to define what can happen in different zones so far.
Can I comment on this?
Sure. Yes.
Christine, everything you said, very much support. I lived and worked down there for 50 years and did a ton of work in Belvedere and Tiburon and so forth. And I would be very leery of if somebody shoving something down your throat from Belvedere in regard to Sebastopol. I would read everything. I'd review everything. I'd be very careful. I've had many battles with Belvedere about a lot of things. And they're just too uppity. And I'd be very, very careful. Now, I know a lot of people down there talk about a combination of Belvedere and Tiburon. And I don't know where all that stands, but I could find out quickly and let you know. My son works for Tiburon.
Well, Marshall, I think that the Belvedere example is just one town doing their objective design standards, right? So this whole effort is, if we talk about the Woodmark project, is there's certain projects that if they meet certain criteria under these state laws, they can bypass essentially the design review entitlement process. So the tool that's been brought forward for cities to have some power in that process is objective design standards. So each city has to come up with their standards so that when the Woodmarks of the world come in next time, they have to meet a lot of criteria that we come up with. They're not just doing the same building they would do in Belvedere or somewhere else. So that's the whole effort. And I certainly appreciate, Christine, your concern that effort is coming from a boilerplate, mentality, and that it's the same standards that could apply anywhere. But it's our job as a committee and as eventually the public, I suppose, or the staff, to make sure that those standards are Sebastopol standards.
Lars, you work in Denver. I'm sure you've seen their design guidelines and their design review standards, which are pretty far to the right of prescriptive. Do you have a sense of what will be coming? And I don't know Belvedere, so I can't comment on that, but that's my shared knowledge with you. Do you know where we're landing? Are we getting to that level of prescription with these design standards?
I think to what Christine pointed out, we're not quite there. Like we haven't quite.
We have no idea what we're getting from these folks. So their last meeting is where they say ta-da after 2 programming meetings.
So I guess I'll clear it up a little bit. What they're presenting at the next board meeting check-in is going to be an admin draft of Sebastopol's design guideline for the city for projects that elect to go through an SB 35, SB 9 process. These aren't going to be the new requirements for every single permit that comes through the city. These are only for those projects that meet those requirements that don't want to go through the discretionary review. So
those are the ones we're most worried about.
Yeah. And that's why these guidelines are being developed to have some sort of discretion over those projects. So what is coming in the next meeting is going to be a admin draft of what they've taken in the last couple meetings. And then it's for the committee to go through that draft, pick out stuff that doesn't really apply, you would rather see go a different way. They mentioned that there's 12 different chapters. Well, maybe chapter 8 doesn't apply to Sebastopol at all. So we don't want chapter 8 in our guidelines. So that's completely gone out of so that's the point. That's the next step in the process, is to take this admin draft that they're going to develop. The committee kind of takes it in as homework, goes through everything, either says, yes, we like this, no, we don't like this, maybe let's tweak this a little bit. And then that gets discussed in, the meeting after the draft, the admin draft is presented. And then we get the final draft, which is taken to planning commission, design review board, city council for full adoption. So there's still, a few more steps in the line before they just drop this huge document on us and say, here you go, you're done.
Okay. and
So I hope that
John,
clears up some of
I
the.
just want to add one thing to this. First of all, you're describing, I want to keep the language clear because I think it's important, but you're describing guidelines, but they're not guidelines, they're objective standards.
Correct, yeah. Sorry.
And that matters. And so
Yes.
what I'm cautioning about or preparing ourselves for is that we're going to get a huge document dropped on us with all kinds of stuff. With a lot of it, we're going to be weeding out and changing. And this is not going to happen in one of those little 2-hour meetings. We're going to have time, Lars and myself and Paul, with the document to go through it.
Yeah,
It's a big process. There's a lot of information in these objective standards, objective guidelines, objective standards, sorry, not guidelines, that we're going to have to weed through, and we're going to need the time to do it. And I felt somewhat pressured because he was throwing these dates out at us that was like this date, and then we're going to give you this, and then we'd like to have this finished by this date. And it's a lot of material because I've gone through the Belvedere standards, and they are very specific in a very general sort of a way. You have to look at them to understand. I can see where it's coming from, and I'm just saying, it is boilerplate. The people in the town of Belvedere did not come up with those standards that are in that document. They picked through boilerplate standards that were presented to them. I'm sure of it. And I'd love to see the Corte Madera, because I think we're going to see the same thing. So we just need to make sure that we have the time and space to go through it and make sure that this is something that's going to work for, the members of our community.
Well, I would think there's not necessarily an urgency to it, other than that the consultant is under contract, right? So there's some time frame related to them, which I would imagine if we really want to, as a city, we could push back on that and say, we need another month to review this, other than, the next Woodmark project slipping in before we have these standards in place or something. Those are sort of the two time related factors, I would say. But I think, Christine, we can ask for time to review it. It seems like that should be possible.
Yeah, because the stuff that we've been getting so far from them to review, we've gotten dropped on us a few days before the meeting,
Right.
for example.
Or
and
a
then
day
we're
or
supposed
two.
to have it. Yeah, and that's it's pushing towards a scenario where things just get approved. I can see it. So I just want to make a cautionary note about this. And I agree, Lars, we do definitely have to deal with this before the next Woodmark shows up, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the back and forth that we have. But I'm
Right.
putting my experience and having studied the Belvedere, and I would like, John, very much if you would print out the Corte Madera for me, because I'm going to compare those two side by side and see, does Belvedere suddenly miraculously look like Corte Madera? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah. So, John, can you just as a request from us, like when we get that next round, that we can talk about it with the consultant at that meeting, but that we then have time to review before they're not just expecting all of our feedback right then and there. That definitely has felt a little challenging.
Granted, the last couple items that we've had have, been probably not given the amount of time that they may have needed for review, but I would think that for this draft document that's going to be coming, there's going to be at least 3 weeks to a month before the next meeting happens, so that it gives you plenty of time to go through that document.
Right.
I can't imagine anybody in a real situation giving you a 400-page document of design standards and expecting you to turn around something in a week's time.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. We can leave it at that. And thanks.
Well,
for
I'd
your
like to
good-
thank the subcommittee for doing this work. It's really challenging. It's I can't even imagine the level of time it takes to sort of go through a document like that. I just, for the public's knowledge, that it's been a challenge in the past to see guidelines at one point try to go to an objective standard, and it was really difficult to get through a few pages with the language that's so needing to be specific. And so this subcommittee is tasked with a really tough task, and so I appreciate it. So thanks.
I have just one more comment that I want to make to you, John, because I'm not sure about this, but I've been reading up on this. We've got the three main laws, which are the SB 9, the SB 35, and the SB 330, and they're addressing three different types of scenarios, and the objective design standards apply to all three. But I did see that the SB 330 sunsets in 2025. So it's almost like it's going to be over before it gets started. But I couldn't find any information on sunsetting of SB 35 or SB 9. You know anything
SB
about
35 and SB 9 are newer
Very new. Yeah.
Senate bills that recently just got passed. Those two, I don't believe will be going anywhere soon. So, you have to meet the minimum criteria of both of those SB projects to fall under that category. So it's not going to apply to everybody. For SB 9, if it's the urban lot split, if you can't provide 2 800 square foot units on your parcel, you can't take advantage of those SB 9 standards. You'll be subject to the regular zoning standards. So it's, these Senate bills aren't just a widespread new thing. It's only if you meet the minimum requirements that you can use them.
There's a really good organization and website that if you guys want to know more about these or any other housing bills, called California YIMBY, as opposed to the NIMBY concept. It's Yes in My Backyard. So CAYIMBY.org has been a really good advocate for all this stuff and has a good website that kind of is clear and fairly simple as to what all this legislation is. So on that note, anything else, or shall we adjourn till the next meeting? Okay, let's adjourn.
Thanks,
The meeting
everyone.
has been adjourned. Thank you all for your time.